So I have Laura back again with me today. We're going to have another conversation on Jordan Peterson. The last time we talked about Jordan Peterson, we focused a lot on her experience of encountering Jordan Peterson in the early days of the first Jordan Peterson wave. And we really focused a lot on how Jordan Peterson was being very helpful to people on an individual level, and in a very real way, was kind of helping to lift people out of hells of their own personal creation.
Yeah, that's a good summary.
And which is why I gave the provocative title that Jordan Peterson was harrowing hell to that video. That's what I was talking about, and that I think that's pretty indisputably the case. Unless you just want to totally ignore the testimony of the hundreds of thousands of people who would tell you that was the case, which I don't think makes any sense, because that's just anti-relational and nonsensical. And not everything has to be to the level of a scientific study to be admitted into evidence, and the personal experience and testimony of people matters. So anyway, we wanted to, now we did get some negative feedback from someone who we think was a good faith actor,
from a friend of mine.
Yeah, a friend of Laura's. And he chose to delete the comment. I would never have asked him to delete the comment. I thought it was completely inbound. Some of the criticisms of Peterson that he was making are criticisms that I've made myself many times in the past. And so what generally the concern that he expressed was that what Jordan Peterson is pushing people toward is not a Christianity in any deep sense, but a kind of a surface level cultural Christianity combined with political conservatism that just gives to a kind of comfortable acceptance of a status quo in our culture that a lot of people would find problematic. I'll just summarize it that way.
Yeah, I think that's what he was saying. And on that note, well, I might actually swing around because my lighting is so weird here. Is this any better?
If we get a little bit more light coming from the window there, that's a little better.
Yeah, it might be better.
It's okay.
Anyway,
you're in shadow. It's fine.
Yeah. So, so on that note, I would say that one of the things that was kind of magical about him in those early days was that he wasn't telling people to do anything really specific, and he wasn't funneling them into some kind of single pre-existing movement or institution, right? It was never like, hey, if you like what I'm saying, go join my paramilitary group or something, right? And
I think some people actually think that's what he's doing, though.
Yeah. No, I mean, I don't think my friend would think that, but but some people do, yeah. So so what he had was that kind of magic or charism, if you want to say it that way, that really, really good preachers have. And I think one of the reasons people got so excited about him was that there are a lot of people who have never heard a good sermon before, a sermon that really makes you want to be a better person, and you walk out of church standing up a little straighter and thinking, yeah, I'm going to do the right thing, and so and I hadn't heard that in a while because I hadn't been engaged with church life, because I had decided like it probably was all not worth what I had thought it was worth, So anyway, but I was going to say, what in terms of what he's encouraging people to do, or like what he moves people into, right? Does he move people into bourgeois, comfortable Christianity? I don't think I would put it that way, because when people hear him, they decide to do all kinds of different things. And that's kind of what's interesting about him,
you also have a hard time, if that's the case, you have a hard time explaining the deep bond and connection with Jonathan Pageau.
Yeah.
Because that is definitely because Pageau often becomes the gateway. Like a lot of the people who moved to Christianity from Jordan Peterson, a lot of them ended up leaning Orthodox, and I think that's probably because of the Pageau influence there. And I don't think that the kinds of things that Pageau talks about could be just remotely described as that at all.
Yeah, no, not at all.
Did you see his talk from the Thunder Bay conference?
I had started it. I think I've seen about 15 minutes of it, but I really like the topic and the approach. Yeah, I'm going to watch the whole thing eventually.
Yeah, he really, like, if you really want to know, like, if you want to just see like a really good high level summary of what Pajot is all about, like he gets, like, that's him. I think articulating the Christian Neoplatonic worldview in a very simple, easy to understand way that that apparently only scientists with PhDs have a hard time following.
Yes, yeah. And so to try and land the plane that I just got off the ground a minute ago, the point is that when people heard Jordan Peterson in those kind of magical early times, they tended to make all kinds of different resolutions about what they needed to do, because something about the way he spoke to them was very effective, but also very generalizable, or it was affecting them at a deep level, so that so many people would hear him and they'd be like, oh, now I know what I have to do. But it was always something different, because it was always something that pertained to their own life, right? They'd hear him and they'd say, oh, I have to be nicer to my mom. Or they'd hear him and they'd say, oh, I know what I need to do at work. I need to go in there and like act with integrity and work really hard and meet all my deadlines and not manipulate the other people at my workplace. People would make all kinds of different resolutions about how they could live a better life, all just based on, maybe one thing that he said. so that's the gift that he has, I think, is that he doesn't funnel people into any one specific thing. He just inspires them to do better. When he's at his best, that's what he's doing.
Right. Yeah, that is what he's at his best, what he's doing. And I think what causes the reaction that your friend had is like some of his political forays. Definitely like the Twitter behavior was, but here's the thing though. Yes, he had the really awful Twitter behavior, but then he also was the kind of person who would have a friend who was critical of his Twitter behavior along with Jonathan Pajot, to mediate, to talk about that Twitter behavior and acknowledge where he might have gone wrong.
Yeah, well, so
to a certain degree.
Yeah, and that reminds me of something that I wanted to talk about here, which is, have you ever said, when somebody asks you about a public figure, I don't agree with everything he says, but I like such and such about him? Have you ever said that?
Yeah, lots of times.
Yeah, I have too. But I got to thinking about, like, why do we even say that? Because, Nate, have you ever known anyone in your entire life that you agreed with every single thing they ever said?
No.
So why would you ever need to preface your assessment of somebody with, I don't agree with everything he says, but...
Right, yeah, I know, we do it all the time, though.
Yeah, we do it all the time.
Yeah.
And this is the case with Peterson. Like, I could say that about him. I could preface all my assessments of him with, I don't agree with everything he says, because I don't agree with everything he says. But that can't be a benchmark for how you evaluate people. Oh, I agree with everything he says.
Right.
This person and I on a Venn diagram are just a single circle.
Wouldn't be different. You would actually not be different. You would actually not be different persons if that were the case, right?
Right. The implication there is I only really approve of people who are actually me.
Right. Exactly. Yes. Yes. That's right. There's definitely an absolute egocentricity in doing it. And the fact that we say that is kind of evidence of our default egocentric orientation, because why is that even part of the calculus?
Right. So I actually made a resolution to just stop saying that about anyone ever.
That's a really good resolution. I should stop saying that too. Yeah. I think I will say this though, in defense of by saying that, usually I usually say it to soften a critique that I feel that I need to make, and to like acknowledge that I still see the fundamental value of the person as a person.
Although softening a critique sounds more to me like you should be saying, I agree with some of the things he says. Yeah,
that's true. Yeah, that's true.
It's more like softening admiration when you say I don't agree with
everything. I guess. Yeah.
But partly it's a desire to protect yourself, right?
Yeah.
Because
I don't want to be so closely identified with this person that everything that's negative, and I think is the cultural game we play, where if you're associated with a person, you are guilty of whatever crimes that person is guilty of. Is that driving us to talk like that more?
I think so.
I think it is.
Yeah.
So, and this is a very real thing. I'm going to give a real world example of this coming into play. And it's going to cause me to make a critique of someone who I have deep admiration for and whose thought has been profoundly beneficial to me and who I deeply admire. And that's David Bentley Hart.
Oh, sure, yeah.
So I had I had some correspondence with David Bentley Hart and was in the process of setting up a conversation between David Bentley Hart and John Vervaeke on consciousness, which I thought it would have been an amazing conversation that would have been immensely beneficial to a great number of people, because both of them are very deep thinkers with very original ideas on that exact subject, and they would have interesting things to say to each other on that, and they would challenge each other in a good way.
Yeah.
And I was excited to see what would emerge from that conversation. David originally agreed to the conversation. We had a tentative date set for the conversation. John was all over it from the beginning. He's a reader of David Bentley Hart. He likes David Bentley Hart. He was very excited about the prospect of the conversation. That conversation ended up not happening because David pulled out of the conversation when he found out that John Vervaeke had a connection to Jordan Peterson, because David really loathes Jordan Peterson. And it's not just for political reasons. That's certainly a large chunk of it. He believes that Peterson is racist. He really thinks that the Peterson talking to Stefan Molyneux was an unforgivable violation. He believes that Peterson shows sympathy for like the bell curve kind of racialist approach to cognitive ability, and that there's an implicit racism in the way that Peterson thinks about cognitive capability. So that's why. So there, and in additionally, David Bentley Hart is generally skeptical about psychology as a discipline, as a lot of philosophers, particularly philosophers who have a classical background, can be. Because
I am too.
Right. So he's critical of psychology as a discipline, and he also really loves Jung.
So Jung. Sorry, I thought you said you. I was like, he doesn't even know who I am.
Jung. He loves Jung. He loves Jung. And in fact, you can find David critiques of Jungian psychology that David Bentley Hart that wrote like well before anyone knew who Jordan Peterson was. So,
well, actually, this reminds me.
But the politics is definitely, I think the politics is definitely the driving force.
Yeah. And so this is an interesting question for Christians, because I've always thought that any Christian should be prepared to talk to anyone at any time, pretty much.
Yes.
Unless there's a narrow range of people I wouldn't communicate with. And that would just be because they've proven themselves repeatedly to be of such ill will and so mendacious that you actually can't have a conversation with them.
I would say the appropriate time to do it is to think when you think that the person will manipulate the conversation. Not to just for that basically they're incapable of having a good faith conversation. That their only purpose in being in the conversation is going to be to promote whatever it is that they're promoting and nothing else.
Yeah, but I remember the first time I thought about this with regard to public figures in Christianity was when Christopher Hitchens got angry about Pope John Paul II talking to certain people. I think one of them was Tariq Aziz. Do you remember him?
No.
I think that was his name. He was in Saddam Hussein's government.
Gotcha.
But anyway, Christopher Hitchens, I think, said it wasn't very morally nuanced of the Pope to be talking to people who had committed war crimes or were oppressing people or whatever.
And which Pope was this? Was it
John Paul II?
John Paul II. Well, John Paul II talked to the guy who tried to kill him.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Well, but
because Pope John Paul II is an actual serious Christian.
Well, there's an easy whenever someone tells you, "Hey, this Christian figure, they shouldn't have talked to so and so," the standard response has got to be, oh, this man eats with tax collectors and prostitutes. Oh no, you know.
Well, that's to fundamentally not understand what Christianity is.
Right, exactly.
Which is actually to kind of understand, which is to understand Christianity in sort of like, it's just this little cultural thing.
Yeah, it's just
it's
just a club for nice people who are
this little
nice.
thing. It's just this,
Yeah.
it's associated with this place that you go on Sundays and maybe Wednesday nights, and like there's a sort of a social aspect to it, and there's
but no one's ever going to do anything that makes
there's a set of propositions that everybody agrees to believe in, and that's what it is. But that's not Christianity.
Right.
And I don't think that I don't think the idea that that's the kind of Christianity that the kind of Christianity that Jordan Peterson is pushing people into, I don't think that has legs.
No,
I don't see that at all.
Well, I think all kinds of different things happen to people if they get into Christianity because of Jordan Peterson. So for my part, what happened to me was that I had been Catholic, I lost it, and then I went back, and when I went back, I did it with a somewhat broader or deeper spirit, and more openness, and I feel that's working out better. But I was still, basically I'm still just Catholic, like I was kind of just Catholic before, and I was still just Catholic. So in its sense, not much changed. The only thing that changed was that my
But in that sense,
approach, my attitude changed a bit, and just the fact that I was able to re-enter, that was, what changed. But and then for other people, I don't know. I think all kinds of things happen to other people.
Right.
Yeah.
But I think because of the way, because of the way that Jordan Peterson talks about things, I think that he naturally leads people into, if they do find their way back into the religion that they came out of, or if they are discovering religion for the first time because of the contact with Jordan Peterson, I do think that they are entering it into a way that is more likely to lead them into the deep roots of the thing than if they had entered some other way. Not less likely. I think they're more likely. And I think you can see, like, I think here's a perfect example, that conversation I shared with you from Michael Martin's podcast with a gentleman who had been
Dominic D'Souza.
Yeah, Dominic D'Souza comes out of a very traditional Catholic background and had kind of, lost confidence in that. And you could tell by the kinds of names he was mentioning in that conversation that he very much comes out of this Jordan Peterson associated culture that has developed online, right? That we call this little corner of the internet, right? Definitely. Yeah. I mean, he's read Matthew Pajot's book.
Yes.
Right? So that's kind of the giveaway.
Yeah.
So he's not going back to the rigid propositionalist cultural traditional Catholicism he came out of. He's coming back to his Catholicism in a completely new and deeper way.
And that's kind of what happened to me. Yeah.
Right. And that's, how would I describe what happened to me? It's like, for me, I got permission to just be a Christian because it's like, oh, I can be a Christian in that way.
And it'll make sense.
Well, then, I'm all in. I've always been a Christian in that way.
Yes, because when I was an atheist, I would have liked to be a Christian, but I felt like I couldn't be.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, like it's like, oh, I don't at this propositional level.
Yes.
I don't think that this language is exactly right about everything, but I can see what it's talking about at a layer below the propositional.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Okay, but for now, I sent you a question before we had this talk, and it was, what's the worst thing you have ever known to happen to someone due to Jordan Peterson? Like, what was the worst ever result of someone listening?
Really,
I mean, you couldn't come up with anything, right?
I really thought through that, and I honestly, and I'm not saying that Jordan Peterson's, okay, this is where I'm going to actually, Jordan Peterson says something sometimes in a shorthand way that people can definitely get the wrong idea about. So I'm sure that those cases exist where someone has heard something, not heard Jordan Peterson talk about at length about something, but it's
But
heard
they heard
like
a soundbite.
A soundbite of Jordan Peterson has gotten the wrong idea and has led them in the wrong direction. But that's like anyone who, that can happen with anyone who offers their ideas in public.
Absolutely.
Because no one, I mean, first of all, he's not responsible for the fact that the person just took this one like soundbite part of what he said and ran with it. Because he has because he has talked about all those things with more nuance in other places. So, but I actually don't know anyone who's been led down like some kind, like I actually don't know anyone who became alt-right because of exposure to Jordan Peterson. I do know
I don't think I do
I
either.
do, on the other hand, know people who were alt-right.
Oh yeah.
And because of exposure to Jordan Peterson, developed a more human and nuanced worldview.
Yes, because one of the things he does is coach you out of low resolution worldviews.
Yes.
Yes. And I liked that framing of low resolution and high resolution a lot when I first heard it, because something that happens to a lot of people who lose their faith is they crash out of their religion because they see all kinds of things that appear not to make sense or don't conform to the real world. And then they think, I can't believe this anymore. But then he encourages you to take another look at it and question whether your old faith was actually just low resolution rather than wrong. You know?
Right.
So can you make it higher resolution? And if you think about it,
I think now here's the thing, and this is what I think. I'm going to be less critical in this conversation than I thought I would, because politically I have a lot. I mean, I'm a Christian anarchist. I don't have a lot of political alignment with Jordan Peterson.
Yeah.
So, but what I think he's actually trying to do is to make a higher resolution conservatism.
Okay. That makes sense.
And I thought his conservative manifesto video was unwatchably bad and poorly done.
And I haven't watched it at all.
Right. And I couldn't make it all the way through it. But what he's trying to do in it, I think, is good. Because it's like, no, I want you, instead of to think of conservatism merely in terms of like how I'm different from my progressive opposition. What are the roots of conservatism?
Yeah.
Like what are its deep roots? And
so is that like Russell Kirk territory?
I'm not familiar with Russell Kirk, but
enlighten
me.
Oh no. Well, I'm not an expert on Russell Kirk, but there's something that you can call Kirkian Burkean conservatism, right? So people who are somewhat inspired by Edmund
I do know
Burke.
I don't know Kirk. Okay.
Okay, yeah. And then Kirk was an American who lived in the 20th century, and he tried to write a lot of positive stuff about the roots of conservatism. And when I say positive, I mean, not reactionary, as in like, what is this positively about, rather than what does it hate? So yeah, I don't know, that just kind of reminded me of Kirk. He just does a lot of tracing of like, how do conservatives think, what's it based on?
I think, and also the kind of conservatism that he is mapping out is definitely an antidote to this sort of like deconstructive Trumpian kind of conservatism that's dominating the American political space right now, because that Trumpian conservatism is really, it doesn't have any deep, I don't think it has any deep values.
No, I don't either.
It merely wants to break things apart.
Yeah, it's a brick through a window.
Right. And I think Peterson is trying to push people towards something that actually is worthy of the word conservatism, right? That actually cares about conserving things.
Yeah, I haven't been paying I'm really not qualified to comment on this, because I haven't been paying any attention to his political output, really. If he talks to Mathieu Pajot, I'll watch it. But if he talks to some guy who was in the Trump administration, I'm not going to bother. Or an economist or whatever. That's just not what I'm interested in him for. So that's not the content.
Well, I mean, to me, it's like, I just think that politics is it's just it's the wrong place to. So I think that we definitely have to have concern about community and provisional human good. Like, we can't avoid these things. But politics, the problem is that politics is not the only category in which we can put these things.
Yeah.
Like, it's actually not. Like all the political or politics, if your definition of politics is any form of human social organization whatsoever, your definition of politics is overbroad.
Sure.
So, but that's just that's just my perspective as a Christian anarchist.
Yeah, so I got to thinking about what's the worst thing that's happened to people I know who got into Peterson. And I couldn't really think of anything either. Like, I don't know anyone who's like joined a cult or gotten really racist or whatever just because they listened to Peterson.
Mm-hmm.
But I can imagine theoretically that something that could happen to people is that they watched a couple of Peterson videos and then the YouTube algorithm fed them other people who were unsavory. Because that happened to me when I was watching Peterson on YouTube, that I would get a lot of YouTube suggestions for people I already knew I should avoid watching. Because YouTube had an idea of what Jordan Peterson was all about.
That's
I think,
right. Yeah, right. Yeah. So there was
so
a
then YouTube would be like, oh, if you like Jordan
Yeah.
Peterson, you'll probably also like Stefan Molyneux, or you'll like, I don't even want to say
Milo
say the name.
Yiannopoulos, or
Yeah,
exactly. No, but that's an algorithm game. That's
but
like,
yes, that's an algorithm game, and you can follow it or not. And so it's not Peterson's fault if YouTube shows you another video and then you watch it. And people are attracted to those videos or not, right? Because like one thing YouTube was doing to me a lot when I was watching a lot of Peterson was trying to get me to click on videos where people destroy other people with facts and logic.
right.
And I could see that the algorithm was trying something on me.
Mm-hmm.
So I resolved never ever to click on a video that had the word destroys in capital letters in the title.
Yeah. Amen.
But honestly, it took like a year for YouTube to stop serving me those videos, even though I never clicked on them.
That's I was just watching this morning. I was just listening to the panel discussion from the Thunder Bay conference, and John Vervaeke was talking about like trying to move from the culture of debate to the culture of the courtyard. And I couldn't possibly agree more. We did a video recently in our Meditations on the Tarot series where we spent a lot of time, a good chunk of it, talking about what Tom Berg says about how destructive polemic is.
Yeah.
So I definitely agree with that instinct. So let me ask you this. What do you think is the single worst thing that Jordan Peterson has ever done? And I have an immediate, very clear answer to that.
Oh my gosh. I feel bad.
I have two answers to that. One is philosophical and one is cultural.
So for my part, I have a lot of gratitude to him, and I don't want to be like a little chihuahua nipping around his heels. Like just saying I think he did such and such wrong. There are probably some things I could mention. I mean, the Sports Illustrated swimsuit issue thing was idiotic. He should have stayed away from that.
That's just, it was. He's also, here's the thing.
Yeah.
The pushback on that wasn't hard enough. And here's why.
Okay.
He was objectively wrong.
Oh, so did you think she was pretty?
Of course.
Oh, okay.
And I would say, of course she was. And like most heterosexual men I know, prefer women that are of normal size to maybe a little larger than normal size. And this woman was not morbidly obese. She was tall, she had a large frame, and she had plenty of meat on her bones. She was not unattractive in any sense to any normal heterosexual male. I actually think Peterson had been more manipulated. His generation, the cultural aesthetic that was pushed for his generation very much leaned toward that very lean sort of like wayfish and a lot of times like almost androgynous sort of look.
Yeah.
That wasn't a very feminine female.
Yeah.
And he seems to have that preference. And he's not being honest about what formed him to think that.
Interesting.
And he pushed it off as if it was an objective opinion, and that the only thing that could be behind this was some sort of woke political machination. No, he's just wrong, and it was stupid.
That's great. That's the first time I've heard that incident analyzed in that way. I like that very much.
So
okay, yeah. I can mention another thing, and I don't want to be impious by nipping at his heels or whatever, but there was something that did used to disappoint me, and this was even in the fairly early days, like say 2018, which is that he would talk to people from like political think tanks, like say the Heritage Foundation, right? I remember watching a conversation where he was being interviewed by a lady from the Heritage Foundation, and she kicked off the interview by asking him to explain to everybody what was so dangerous about socialism. And neither of them defined socialism in the conversation. And I was pretty sure that when Peterson hears socialism, he's thinking Venezuela or the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, right? And when the Heritage Foundation lady says socialism, she's probably thinking something more like Canadian health insurance.
Oh yeah.
Right? Yeah.
Right.
And so I got the sense that he was somewhat putting himself open to exploitation by, venal and superficial political forces.
Well, that's really good though, because that's kind of like, I mean, when it comes to his, one of the reasons his political stuff is not good is because he actually stays very low resolution. And the way he talks about socialism is like a prime example of that.
Yeah, well, you go into that because my friend who left the comment might be interested in what you'd have to say on that topic, because he's definitely a man of the political left.
Right. His understanding of his understanding of socialism is based entirely on this caricature where socialism is always North Korea or Venezuela or Stalinist Russia. Like that's precisely right. He has, it's like, he doesn't have any appreciation for how am I going to say this? He actually, his idea, essentially his idea of economics is a very hard binary.
Yeah.
That is not really reflective of reality. Of the kind of worst kinds of libertarians, essentially. And although I've never heard him say that Canada should give up its medical.
I think in the early days, before he started talking to a lot of politics people, I'm pretty sure I remember him once or twice saying something quite positive about the Canadian health.
He did. He sounded like a Canadian conservative, which is basically like a centrist Democrat in American politics.
Like Stephen, what was his name? The Prime Minister, conservative. No, I can't remember anymore.
I don't. Canadian prime ministers.
Canadians can tell us in the comments. I'm sorry, Canadian.
Sorry. I know Brian Mulroney. I remember his name. I remember. I mean, obviously, I know Trudeau's the current prime minister, but I could not. I think that's probably it. That's like my full list of Canadian prime ministers who I could name from memory.
Yeah.
Oh, Trudeau's father was prime minister too. Right?
Oh, sure.
Yeah. So, yeah. Was it Pierre? Was his father's name? I think.
Yes.
Maybe.
Pierre Trudeau.
Okay. Oh, there you go. Okay, so I get 3.
Yeah. No, there was definitely a Stephen. Is it Stephen Carter? Something like that. Anyway.
Yeah. But essentially, I just think that like this entire he puts too much on economics.
Yeah, and again, I think he is low resolution, but I don't enjoy hearing him talk about politics. I've never enjoyed hearing his analysis of the Trump phenomenon either.
No.
I feel like he could study Trump at length and come up with interesting things to say, but I feel like the things that he does say about him are probably based on just like reading some articles in the National Post or something, rather than upon close observation of him over a long
What do you think he gets wrong when he talks about the Trump phenomenon?
It just seems like he hasn't thought about it that deeply, and he hasn't observed the man very much. I don't want to go into a lot of detail because people feel strongly about Trump and they all have their own opinions that I'm not going to change. But I feel like he would have very interesting things to say about Trump if he. I
think he had like when he said at one point I remember him talking. This was early on when he was talking about the Trump phenomenon. I think he actually had this. I think he had the spirit of it pretty much dead on, like at an intuitive level. Because he was talking about like how he could see somebody going into the booth and saying, "Oh, fuck it."
Oh, for sure. Right? Yeah. No,
that's really that right there is what drove the the Trump phenomenon is that
Yes.
we've had the illusion of differentiation in our politics for a long time, when it's really just two flavors of neoliberalism.
Yeah.
And nothing else has ever been on the table. And I think people hoped that Trump would represent something that wasn't just more neoliberalism, but he wasn't. I mean, ultimately, when Trump governed, he was just more neoliberalism as usual, with a whole lot of just bizarre distraction.
Right. Yeah. No,
And
I think
like
he got it. I think he got it right about...
some real degeneration of basic moral principles.
Yeah, and also basic principles of governance. But
right.
I agree with you that I think he got it right why people voted for Trump. But I don't think his analyses of Trump himself and his abilities and his nature and his style and what he's up to, I don't think they're based on a very long observation of him or a lot of reflection on him.
Gotcha.
So I feel like it would be really interesting to just like have Peterson take a day to detox from all the news. Just like tell him to like go stay at a hotel.
He does have a very reactive personality, doesn't he?
And then take a day to like make him watch like 10 hours of just raw footage of Trump just interacting with people, at rallies, or, giving people presidential awards and handling questions from reporters and all that kind of stuff. And then give him another day to just like think about everything he saw. And then ask him some questions about what he thinks of Trump. Then I would be interested in what he would have to say.
So maybe I'm not sure that I've ever heard him go like, where do you think where specifically do you think he goes wrong, if you could put your finger on it?
Again, I just think
I'm just wrong in thinking about what Peterson has said about Trump. Yeah. Like, honestly, that kind of low resolution, intuitive thing is like the only thing that stands out to my mind.
Well, you were saying what he says about Trump voters, which is different.
Right.
Okay. Things he says about Trump the man himself, I think are low resolution, but I'm just going to leave it there because I don't want to get into a big internet argument about what kind of
person Donald Trump is.
Exactly.
That's not what I'm here for. I think honestly, the best analysis of who Trump is as a person was provided to us by David Bentley Hart in 2011 when he wrote the essay "A Person You Flee at Parties." If you really, I mean, that's the essence of Donald Trump. I mean, and yeah, I kind of do want to get into this.
Really? I really
yeah, because I think that's at the heart of, I think that's the heart of your friend's critique, is that
maybe
he thinks that Peterson is pushing people toward Trumpism, and I think in some of his political talk, that's probably true.
Well, I think the reason I don't want to get into it is just because I have a lot of friends on BOM, and
yeah, okay,
yeah.
Well, but this is legitimate because that's a Jordan Peterson space, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so here's what I would say to your friend, is that there's more going on with these people than their politics, right?
Yeah.
So maybe Jordan Peterson is pushing people toward a kind of low resolution politics that's not good, because he doesn't have the same kind of nuance when he talks about politics that he does when he talks about culture or ideas, right?
Yeah, that's possible. How many people do you think?
But the thing is that there's more to these people, and I have relationships with the people that you're talking about too. And I don't, my political disagreement doesn't interfere with that at all, because I know that there's more going on with these people, and that they're thinking about life more deeply than that. And I have close friends that are Trump. I have a good atheist friend who was a hardcore Trump supporter. And he definitely fell into he had been a libertarian for most of his adult life, but he voted for Obama twice. So he was not he wasn't a hardcore conservative, mostly ideologically, he leaned libertarian. And he voted for Trump basically because he wanted a hand grenade. That was
because he wanted what?
A hand grenade.
Oh, okay.
He knew what he was voting for. He knew that Trump would just bring chaos, and that's what he wanted.
Yeah. Yeah, there are a few people like that.
Right.
Or maybe a lot. I don't know.
Right. So, but
I have really been amazed over the years at how different a picture of Donald Trump different people have. If you just talk to different people, I think there are basically 3 of them, maybe 4. Right? There are like 4 possible Donald Trumps you can believe in.
Okay, let's hear this. I love this.
Oh no.
Let's do it. All right, let's go. Lay them out for me. This is fascinating.
Really, I really didn't want to.
First of all, there's no way this isn't relevant because we all know he's going to run again. So it's not like he's lost cultural relevancy, because he will be the Republican nominee for president again in 2024.
We're going to get so many.
No matter how hard people try to make DeSantis happen, it's not going to happen. We will have Donald Trump again.
We're going to get so many angry comments that are going to lead to pointless arguments in the comment section, don't you think?
I don't think so, because I think we're trying our best to try to understand where everyone's coming from here. I don't think we're not passing judgment. Like, if you voted for
Trump, you just want me to do a taxonomy of what I've seen.
Right, exactly. I don't have any judgment on anyone because they were a Trump voter.
Yeah, like, I'm happy to be friends with people.
First of all, I'm a Christian anarchist. I don't vote.
Yeah.
So I really don't care.
I wanted to talk more about that, right? I was kind of hoping we'd get more into like why we like people like Dorothy Day, rather than like what we maybe don't like about Trump.
Well, but that might be another conversation another day.
Yeah, I can give you a taxonomy, okay, of different things, different Donald Trumps that people believe in. Okay. So there's the one that like people who watch MSNBC believe in. And
like the supervillain Trump?
Yes, where he's like he's strategically evil, right? He's
right. They actually give him a lot of power.
Yes, this is he has a lot of power. He's very scheming. He has a lot of well-defined racist beliefs, like propositional racist beliefs,
right, exactly.
Like if you sat down and talked to him about different ethnicities, he would sound like Hitler. Like he would have like rankings of like who's better and who else and why, and it would be like thought out, you know. And he would also have a plan for like how he wants to disadvantage certain groups. Right. He would have some kind of evil long end game.
And he's some sort of Hitler level master persuader who can just like hypnotize the masses into following and then buying into these same set of beliefs. Like the amount of power they give him is like pretty crazy.
Yes. And and whenever he makes a law, there's some evil motive behind it, that there's some group of people he wants to hurt. Right. Yes. Okay. And then there's
he's also inclusion with other forces on the globe that are also opposed to their. I mean, so that's all part of their narrative.
Yeah. Then there's the kind of like Scott Adams view of who he is, right? Basically, like he's a smart guy. He has good instincts for like how to persuade people and how to get certain things done that he wants to get done, right? He's practical. He's a businessman, you know. He's just going to get into office and like adjust tax rates, and maybe more people are going to have jobs, and like it's basically fine. And the people who think he's an evil mastermind are crazy, and we're just going to laugh at them.
See, Scott Adams gives him too much power too, though, in his view, because Scott Adams actually explicitly makes the case that he is in fact a genius persuader on the Adolf Hitler level, and that he has like great rhetorical skill.
Yes, but he doesn't. He also believes
it's absolute nonsense. He has 2 rhetorical gifts. He has 2 rhetorical gifts. One, he understands that images are powerful. So when he speaks, he will say something that will put an image of something in someone's mind. So he's actually giving them an image and allowing them to draw their own conclusion from the image that he's giving them, which is part of the reason why we have this interpretive variance. Because he tends to speak in these sort of images, and he doesn't give you a lot of propositional content as to what he means by the use of this image, so people draw their own conclusions.
Oh, yes.
And so people kind of hear what they want,
right,
one way or the other, whether inclined toward agreeing with him or disagreeing with it. So he has that. And then what was the second thing I was going to say? that's the prime. There was a second. I had a second thing in mind, but I've lost it. But
yeah, but basically, yes,
he's
Scott
not
Adams
really
believes that he's a brilliant manipulator, a brilliant persuader, but that in terms of what he's going to do in office, he's basically going to be a regular Republican, right? Isn't that kind of, or like a populist Republican, you know?
Yeah.
Like he's not going to be evil, but he's not like he's just going to do regular practical stuff that a canny businessman would do. Don't you think? Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's the Scott Adams view. But I do think that Scott Adams is actually factually incorrect in his giving. I think telling people what they want to hear. That's the other gift that he has.
Okay,
he knows he has a good sense of knowing what you want to hear, and he's good at creating images. But those are all his only rhetorical gifts.
Yeah. People accuse Peterson of doing that.
Yes.
Have you ever heard that before?
Yes.
Because Peterson will say things like, if I'm talking in Peterson's voice, he'll say stuff like, people tell me that I say a lot of things that they knew deep down but couldn't articulate. And some people interpret comments like that to mean Peterson makes people feel smart by telling them that these inchoate thoughts that they had are actually true and brilliant. Like he's flattering them or something. That's not what's going on there.
But they've made a category error in what he's talking about. Talking about, though, because he's not talking about what. Generally, he says that. I think what that's about is like he is help. I think that's when that comment is made. Generally, it means that Peterson has given people like the beginnings of understanding how to break down how to break down the modern frame and begin to trust their intuitions more. I think that's that's right. What that's really about.
Exactly. And he'll tell people you know this, but it's a Jungian thing, isn't it?
Yes.
Right? He'll tell people you already know this.
It has to do.
I'm just explaining it to you.
Right, exactly. And it's directly connected to myth.
Yeah.
And it has that when he's talking about it has no political content. There's no political content there whatsoever when people are talking about that. It's like, he's giving people permission to actually like begin to trust that their intuitions might have some meaning.
Exactly. But there's like an evil way to frame that, right?
Yeah.
People who think he's evil are like,
it's an evil modernist way of framing it, and it's
telling them they're right about everything.
Right.
But and so then that's how he's like getting them into his cult or whatever. And then he's going to manipulate.
But the people who are making that critique are deeply trapped within modernity themselves because they can't see. And that's why they make that critique. Because they really think it's still all about this propositional layer.
Yeah.
And so what Peterson is doing, it can't actually really be related to myth and intuition and spirituality. No, that can't be the case. So he's just giving these people that's why there's hyperfixation on the political part, which he does do a pretty disastrous job on. I would actually be inclined to agree. But there's more going on with him than that.
Yes.
And that means that there's more going on with the people who are impacted by him.
Here's a question.
Whatever politics they might gravitate towards.
Yes. I have a question for you, hypothetical question. What would have happened to the Peterson phenomenon if the people who did not like him and wrote nasty articles about him had decided to just ignore him?
I think that he probably wouldn't have blown up.
But I think also his whole phenomenon would have been a lot less political. Like I think he would have blown up on some small scale on the internet.
Yes.
But it would have stayed more of a Jungian psychology thing and less of a political thing.
I think he would have still got the attention of people like Paul Vanderklay.
Yeah.
But I don't think that like he would not have become he would not be somebody's name who is known by most people.
Yeah.
So in a way there's a positive and a negative side to that.
Yeah.
And I think it's definitely its impact on him personally has been disastrously negative because he's a very sensitive person.
Yeah.
And these mischaracterizations of him that like reduce him to this like Bond villain kind of level character are deeply hurtful to him.
Oh, yeah, of course. Well, that's why I was to say, like, if the stuff that had happened to him had happened to me, I probably would have just gone out in my shed and shot myself, frankly.
Right. I couldn't handle that. I'm a fairly sensitive person myself. It's like, it's like I have a small YouTube channel with like 850 subscribers, and that's like the level I'm comfortable with.
Yeah.
I don't have I can handle some criticism. I'm not like totally thin-skinned, but I certainly couldn't handle like an all-out assault, like an all-out nonstop assault like Peterson has had to undergo.
I know.
It's like I'm not
So you
I'm
can't
not
blame
strong
him if
enough
he's
for
gone a
that.
little,
No, that's precisely right. And that's what I found.
if he says intemperate things or
Right.
or he's or if you perceive him as being friends with the wrong people now, well, if I had been in his situation, I would eventually have gone to live with whoever was willing to be my friend.
That's
Right?
right.
Yeah.
Right. He talked to Stefan. Yeah, it's really simple. Why did he talk to Stefan Molyneux? He talked to Stefan Molyneux because early on, like he was one of the few people who wanted to talk to him.
Right. And people used to say to him in the early days, why don't you talk to more left-leaning people? And he would always say, because they don't want to talk to me.
Right. Right.
In 2017, if a number of left-leaning people had been willing to have him on and discuss things with him, his trajectory might have been quite different.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. That's absolutely true. And I think that's kept and also that's what's kept him from, I think he shows immense potential for self-awareness and growth, like consistently.
Yeah.
So I think if he had not been like, okay, he's the enemy to the left to the whole time, and he'd had some deep, interesting, nuanced conversations with people from the left, I think maybe he would have developed better political intuitions, right?
Yeah.
And to realize that not all socialism is Marxism, that Christian socialism pre-existed Marxism by a lot.
And do you remember how
there is a Christian way of enacting socialist principles that is not remotely related to Marxism.
Yeah, and do you remember when he did a couple of events with somebody who was a male to female transgender person?
Yeah, yeah.
They're something.
Yeah, he was very gracious.
Yeah. And he treated that person as very much an individual with an interesting personal history, that is complex and, worth discussing and all that kind of stuff.
Right.
Okay, but we were doing a taxonomy of Trump.
Yes, right. So we have the Bond villain caricature of the MSNBC crowd. And then we talked about the Scott Adams. It's like gifted rhetorician who talks a big talk, but really is going to govern somewhat normally and practically because he's a businessman and he has practical sensibilities. Exactly. What's number three?
Number three, there's like the sort of what like Sam Harris would say, or John McWhorter, or maybe probably also David Bentley Hart.
Oh, yeah.
Have you heard Sam Harris talk about Trump?
Yeah, I have heard.
Would David Bentley Hart
actually literally compared what he compared what he thought the personality type of the Antichrist would be to Donald Trump and that essay that he wrote in 2011. So
Sam Harris doesn't make a lot of references to the Antichrist, but do you think their views are consonant? It's
like David Bentley Hart views him as a person of like basically zero moral character. Like that's who is a representation of all of the worst aspects of us culturally as a collective.
Do you remember when Sam Harris called him a malignant Chauncey Gardner?
Yes.
Yes.
I do remember that exactly, Mark.
That's probably the best way of summing up that viewpoint.
Right.
Right. That he's
right, because he doesn't have the power in that viewpoint that he does in the Bond villain MSNBC. He's both evil and incompetent at the same time.
Right. And if any of your viewers have never seen Being There, just go watch Being There and then think about the malignant Chauncey Gardner comparison and see what you think.
So just for those who don't know, like Chauncey Gardner is basically this bumbling idiot type of character who just stumbles into good things happening. So there's like zero competence is what's expressed by
largely because people project this wisdom onto him, right?
Yeah.
He'll just tell you that in the winter the flowers die, but in the spring they come back again, and everyone's like, oh, so you're saying, and then they
Right. Yes.
they insert some deep meaning
Which is, I
into
think that's kind of how I believe that is how Sam Harris thinks about religious thought too.
it. Yeah, maybe.
That's
But
what
yeah,
he
so
thinks.
that Trump is just a guy who had a platform for various reasons. So he was well known. He's kind of a Homer Simpson, right? He's very id driven. And he has a narcissistic need for people to like him. And so he'll just speak well of or associate with anyone who says positive things about him. So in that model, right, if he has any relationship with David Duke, it's probably just because David Duke likes him, right? But not because Trump is some kind of a scientific racist, right? I mean, has like, racial theories that are like, it's just that, oh, David Duke likes me. That's cool.
Well, he seems like, I mean, honestly, I mean, I think there's some, I mean, he seems to be a very insecure human being. And he
I
does
also get
seem
that
to,
impression.
he seems to respond to flattery.
Yes.
And yeah, I think there's a certain like that there's a certain truth to that. I think, I mean, that kind of plays with me in terms of what I just from my observation. It's like it all becomes about like, that's why he's so obsessed with loyalty, right? Who likes me, who's going to be loyal to me, who cares about me, because he's so profoundly egocentric.
And so that's, yeah, and like John McWhorter often says, oh, he's about 13,
Yeah.
like he's kind of an insecure,
there are ways that I feel
mind.
bad about him. His father was an awful human being. It's like, I think maybe the best thing that could happen with Jordan Peterson and Donald Trump is for Jordan Peterson to treat Donald Trump in therapy.
That would be incredibly interesting. I would love to see the results of that. Right. See, right, this is the thing, getting back to who should Christians talk to, as many people as possible is the answer. Like, if some people heard that Donald Trump was going into therapy with Jordan Peterson,
well, yeah, as a Christian,
this means Peterson's evil. But
as a Christian, I don't want to.
As a Christian, I'd love to see that.
I'm a Christian anarchist. I'm not going to vote at all, but I certainly wouldn't vote for Donald Trump, even if I were going to vote. But you know what? He's still a human being created in the image of God.
Absolutely.
And I should try to love him.
Yeah. And yeah, if I heard he was going into therapy with Jordan Peterson, I would be so interested in how that would play out, and I would think that would be a great thing to try to do. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. Okay. Now, is there a fourth one? Do you think I left anything else?
You said you had 4.
Well, I said there are maybe 4.
Maybe 4.
Maybe because I just thought those 3 might not sum it up. Do you think there's another one?
Let me think here. I think yeah, there is. Yeah. And I think this is the one that kind of reflects like what the voters see in him a little bit, where it's like there's a Trump, I would say there's a Trump supporter that has like maybe a somewhat realistic view of who Trump is as a person, but supports Trump nonetheless because they just want to see the system disrupted. So I think this is the kind of I think this is like the Michael Malice Trump supporters driven by this.
Okay, so what do they think he is?
So this would be like,
right? Not like who are they, but what do they perceive him to be?
A useful tool.
Okay.
To expose the system for what it is. This is the kind of, and this is why
useful tool, but who is he?
It doesn't actually matter.
Okay.
It's just that Trump's personality, because it is useful for drawing back the curtain and showing the machinations of the system that we have, of unveiling just exactly how broken and corrupt it is. Even if he doesn't have the will to actually smash it, his behavior is such as because his adversarial relationship with the press, for example, demonstrates the corruption of the cathedral. Like, so there's that view, that sort of, you know, Michael Malice, Curtis Yarvin kind of view of Trump, where it's like they don't really care about him, but he becomes a useful tool for moving the timeline forward.
Is that the most cynical view?
I think it's cynical. Yeah, it's very cynical. It's a very cynical view, and I think it's the one that treats Donald Trump the least as a person. He's just, all he is, you know, there's no identification with Trump other than like, oh, he amuses me. I find what he like people like that will say, oh, what he does is hysterically funny and useful.
They love him as a troll.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. They love him as a troll and for his entertainment value. And they don't care that he's completely, in terms of political effectiveness, he's completely broken and incompetent. It doesn't matter to them. So they might actually agree with the Sam Harris competency evaluation, right? And they don't care.
Yeah, incompetency is a big part of that Sam Harris, John McWhorter, maybe David Bentley Hart.
Yeah. Well, I think David Bentley Hart is primarily just like the moral reprehensibleness of, is the big thing for him. Yeah. It's really just like, and I think here's the thing with David is like, he automatically lumps anyone who supports him in with that moral reprehensibility in a way that is not good as a Christian. Sorry, David, it just isn't. You got to stop doing that. And I love you and you're great, but please stop doing that.
But yeah, no, I know what you mean. Okay, so back to my friend and his comment. Maybe we haven't. Do you think we've said enough about the extent to which Peterson himself is kind of a standard bourgeois person who, if he were a Christian, well, maybe that's a separate question, but who's just sort of doing comfortable neoliberalism? And
no, I don't. Well, here's the thing: is like I think those buckets are separate for Peterson, which is maybe part of the problem.
Because if he were to commit to Christianity, I'm not sure I could predict exactly how he would live that out.
Right.
Like, do you feel like you would know what that would look like?
I don't know. I don't know. I mean, again, I think he shows great capacity for intellectual honesty, capacity for change. I think it's a matter of like, if he talked to the right Christians, I could see his politics changing too, and maybe becoming more nuanced. But as long this is part of what concerns me of him choosing to have Daily Wire as his platform. It's like, oh, we're just gonna get standard neoconservatism.
I mean, at the same time, though, he still talks to interesting people and has good conversations with them. Like, I thought his conversation with McGilchrist was still very good, and his conversation with Mathieu Peugeot was great.
In fact, he actually seems to have been gravitating away lately. He seems to have been gravitating away from the political conversations more and more, which is good. So yes, so far my deeper concerns about Daily Wire as a platform have not borne to be very warranted. But I think it's still, because he's on Daily Wire, I still think it limits that growth potential, I think.
Yeah, well, we'll see. Yeah, we'll see.
Like, I would like to see an intelligent Christian socialist have a conversation with him.
That'd be great. Yeah.
Yeah, I would love to see him talk to John Milbank or David Bentley Hart or somebody like that.
Yeah, good luck.
Yeah, right. What? Right. Yeah, never gonna happen. And Milbank hates him. Well, Milbank used to be. Here's the thing about Milbank, kind of turned on him. Milbank actually kind of liked him early on and said some favorable things. But then, like, him and Rowan Williams and David Bentley Hart were all signatories to basically a protest over Peterson's appearance at Cambridge. And it was specifically this racist accusation that had legs with them because of the flirtation with the bell curve kind of ideas and the conversation with Molyneux.
But if you got Jordan Peterson in a room with somebody who had a lot to say on that topic and had done a lot of good research, and
he listened.
He would listen.
Yeah,
exactly.
right,
And
exactly.
he would possibly
He's not
modify
the,
his
yeah,
view if you
yeah,
give him some
right.
new
And
information.
here's the thing. It's like, I think part of this is like a generational thing, right? Well, actually, think of Bentley Hart's Gen X. So I don't know when the kid, so it's not entirely a
Wait,
generational thing.
how old is Peterson? Is he a boomer?
He's no, I think he's kind of
Is he
like in
Gen X?
between. He's like in between. He's not quite
Okay.
young enough to be Gen X. But he's not really a boomer either. He's like, him and Paul Vanderklee are sort of in that in between Gen X and the boomers kind of
Okay, yeah.
Generation.
Yeah.
And I think Milbank, I think, is about that age too. David's a little younger. I think David's only like maybe 3 or 4 years older than me, so he's an older Gen Xer. He's definitely Gen X. But I think maybe that 3 or 4 year gap is enough for him to just have more innate trust in legacy media. But I think that's what causes it is just like them having like way more trust in institutional legacy media than is warranted by any like reasonable view of the situation.
Yes. Yeah. Now that you mention it, yes, people I know who are boomers or older, that's one of their defining characteristics is a lot of trust in legacy media.
Right. Because that's that. And it's not, I don't hold them to blame for that. It's like they have every reason to have that because everyone trusted it.
Yeah.
For all of their life.
And then there's an opposite mistake, which is
don't trust anything.
Well, there's don't trust anything, but then there's also, I know who to trust. It's the people with really cheap, badly designed websites that are in like some strange corner of the internet who are like, living in some weird place and just writing these screeds and with like a million exclamation points. They're the ones who must be right because like the mainstream wants to silence them.
Right. But at the same time, it's all about, it's just a balance. It's like, and also it's not like, I mean, you should be leery of legacy media, but if you want to make the claim that literally everything that comes out of legacy media is 100% a lie all the time, that's not a case that I think is viable.
Yeah.
Just because something comes out of legacy media doesn't mean that it's automatically wrong.
Oh, now let me ask you something. Did you watch Peterson's conversation or debate, whatever you want to call it, with Zizek?
Yes, I did.
What did you think of that?
I thought that he showed that he understands nothing about socialism because he like basically was just like, socialism is exactly what was said in the Communist Manifesto, which is not a very deep or important Marxist text at all. Like it's even a bad understanding of Marxism, let alone the entire like, larger view of socialism that's beyond Marxism, because all socialism is not Marxism.
Yeah.
I mean, I was glad to see them come together on the cultural stuff as like kind of an old school leftist sort of thinking type myself. I think that the cultural stuff it's anti-solidarity, which is essentially what Zizek said, and he's right. So how are you going to have solidarity on like very real class issues when you're at each other's throats over all this identity nonsense?
Yeah.
So I think that he showed that he doesn't really understand it other than as a caricature. So for Peterson, all forms of socialism necessarily lead to totalitarianism. And I would say he's wrong. What are kibbutzes totalitarian? Are Hutterite communities totalitarian? Is the Bruderhof totalitarian? He's just like, he's wrong. Now he can say that the use of the capturing of state power in order to implement socialism is wrong. But guess what? A whole bunch of socialists would say that too. Lots and lots of socialists would say that.
Yeah.
So.
Oh, and one thing that jumped out at me from the Zizek debate was the way he talked about relationships between business owners and employees in a way that kind of indicated that he had no idea about anything to do with labor history.
Right.
Like, do you remember he said something about like that that Marx accuses capitalists of exploiting the workers, and then he's like, but if you own a company and you exploit your workers, your company's not going to succeed, and people aren't going to want to work for you anymore, or something like that.
Except for
he's
that's
like, so
not
obviously
actually
you
the
can't
case.
exploit your
Like,
workers.
right, that,
it's like,
yeah.
There's like, I feel like that's just evidence
People
of like
put
a ton
their
of stuff
lives
that we
on the
don't know
line.
that's really
People
important.
put their lives on the line in union organization because that's, I mean, come on. I mean,
yeah.
And here's the thing: the reason, I mean, I Marxism doesn't work because of its materialism. That's where that, I mean, and this is where I would probably disagree with Zizek. Although Zizek's weird because he's kind of like, he's very theological in his thinking. Because of essentially because of Hegel, which gets into a whole discussion of like, well, how should we read Hegel? And that's like probably not something we want to get into right now.
No, I can't tell you how to read Hegel. Sorry.
But yeah, I forgot what I was going to say.
Oh, no,
we were talking about like the history of basically the history of labor organization, and how like Peterson made the facile argument that like if employers treat their employees bad, then it's
like he'd never read a single account of what it was like to work in a factory in the 19th century,
Right. And he also is like not dealt with, like, also I think he's still like, so here's the thing. So here's what what undergirds, like, it's a matter of like, but this is the other mistake that socialism makes besides its materialism, is making everything about the economy.
Oh, you were saying it fails because of its materialism. And
right,
actually, I was going to ask you, that was the thing I forgot. I was going to ask you, do you think Marxism can be separated from resentment?
No, I don't think it can, it's because of its material level analysis. I think that like you have no chance to like get to the kind of like socialism that spontaneously arises out of seeing the world as the household of God. That is like the roots of a robust Christian socialism.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I'm always on the lookout for resentment these days, because I started trying to purge it from my own life, and honestly, it was probably from listening to Peterson.
Yeah, right.
So I started thinking things like, how can I tell my life story without saying anything resentful? How can I frame my problems without being resentful? All that kind of thing. And Marxism and resentment do kind of seem to be inseparable, and that's one of the things that invariably corrupts that movement.
Well, because it's like, okay, because it's only looking, it makes a mistake, and I think Peterson makes the same mistake himself sometimes. And his conversation with Ian McGilchrist was interesting because Ian McGilchrist kept trying over and over again to get him to look at from a higher level view, and not to be so focused on the material benefits of capitalism, right? Because his argument for capitalism is good is entirely material. It's entirely materialist argument, right?
Yes. So this is one of the things that makes me jump up and down in my kitchen and pound on things when I hear him say it on podcasts, is the thing he does where he says capitalism's great because 100 years ago people were living on X number of dollars per day, and now they're living on way more dollars per day. Have you noticed him saying this?
Right.
It drives me crazy because that's a terrible measure of what's going on in people's lives and how valuable it is.
But yet we're killing ourselves at a higher rate than we ever have.
Yes, and we hate each other.
Right, which is the kinds of things that McGilchrist kept trying to bring him back to. He's like, so it's like, no, it's like we can't continue to look at things. So I think that here's the thing, is that materialist capitalism is evil. It's evil. There's no other word for it. It's evil. It's definitionally evil, and materialist Marxism is evil. Did you just, oh, Laurie, you just froze on me, it looks like. Uh-oh. So yeah, as I was saying, so you have like the reality is that materialist Marxism is evil and materialist capitalism is evil, and we have to like the conversation has to become more nuanced than that. It's not like there's
Okay.
there are more options on the table. Did you hear me?
Yeah. Did you only just start recording? Because I only just heard the recording in progress voice.
I just resumed it. I paused
Just
it when
now.
we crashed. Yeah. We had a crash, and right after I said that materialist capitalism is evil and materialist Marxism is evil, we crashed. So apparently the internet does not want people to hear that message. So.
Right.
So yeah, so this is what I would like to see. I would like to see the political Peterson and the cultural, like really spiritual, like he's talking about spiritual things in his own way. The cultural spiritual Peterson, I would like to see them like come together in a way so that he can see the way in which those things can't be disconnected from one another. So what do you think about that? Like basically what I'm saying is that
I agree.
Okay. All right. So that's like, yeah, I would love to see, I would really like to someone to get Bulgakov's The Household of God into Peterson's hands and see what he makes of that.
I haven't read that one, but that sounds like it would be.
It's Bulgakov's theory of economics, which is deeply rooted in his Christianity, that sees like basically that sees economia as properly related to the relational life of the Trinity that we were all called to participate in.
Yeah. Now here's another thing I was thinking about this morning, and maybe we could use a notice is telling me my internet connection is unstable.
Well,
let's see if I can get this last question in, and we can land the plane. Let's see if we can
wrap it up really.
Yeah. Okay. So my final question is, when you look at turbulent periods in history where, Nazi Germany or whatever, the people you admire, don't they tend to be individuals who were just doing the right thing rather than people who started some kind of rival political movement?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah, because revolution just leads to more revolution. Ultimately, yeah. So, and I think this is where Peterson is at his best, is when he maintains that focus on helping individuals transform, and to look at the world in a more healthy way. So, yeah, let's just go ahead and end on that note.